Mucho gusto estar contigo hoy. Pero no hablo español muy bien. Entonces, I will speak English from now on, okay? I also want to acknowledge up front that all of the examples I'm going to talk about today are from US-based brands. And that's not because I don't care about brands from other places. It's just that these are the stories that I know, and I want to share from my expertise. Now, I'm learning so much about this market by being here, and I hope that I'll be able to return one day to share my insights about Latin American brands. But for today, I hope, and I'm confident actually, that you will see how all of the examples I use are relevant to any brand from wherever. So, vámonos, okay? Everyone here has a brand. You either work on a brand or you own a brand yourself. Now, I have been working on and researching great brands for about 25 years, and I can almost guarantee that you are not getting the full power of your brand. Because great brands are doing things that you need to be doing. And you can actually get started doing them today, right away. So I'm going to jump right in, and I first need to clarify that when I say brand, I'm not talking branding. I'm not talking about logos or names or taglines. Those are branding. And branding is kind of a problematic term. Actually, I'm sorry, I have to kind of go off for a minute here and talk about branding, because if you think about what the word branding means, well, let's talk about where branding came from. It originated way back when people had cattle and ranches, and they needed to make sure that people wouldn't steal their cows. So they would practically torture these cows by taking this pointy iron rod, sticking it into the burning hot flames, and then searing their mark on their cows, just so that if someone found their cow, they'd know who it belongs to. That's what branding means. And it's crazy to think that branding works as a business concept today. So we're not going to be talking about branding as in putting your stamp on something to show that you own it. We're going to be talking about brand building as in developing a powerful tool that creates value for you and your organization. So we're not going to be talking about logos. In fact, how many of you love Apple? Yeah, lots of you love Apple, right? I bet that none of you love Apple because of that little Apple logo, right? You probably love Apple because of its exquisitely designed products, or maybe its fun and exciting retail stores, or maybe the cool apps. All of those things are the Apple brand. So your brand isn't a logo. Okay? Your marketing isn't your brand. You may be familiar with a couple of years ago with the department store JCPenney. They ran into all sorts of problems. You see, Ron Johnson, who actually came from Apple, took over at JCPenney, and he tried to institute kind of a whole takeover or makeover for the company. So he ran really funny ads with the comedian Ellen DeGeneres, and he introduced a new pricing strategy, but the sales of JCPenney tanked because even though their marketing was very creative, the actual store experience was off-brand and was kind of off-putting to consumers, and it wasn't very well executed anyway. Another common misconception about your brand is that your consumer owns your brand. I hear this all the time, and that's just not true. You own your brand. When you say that your consumers own your brand, you're merely emphasizing what people perceive about your brand. And perceptions can change with the wind. People don't know your mission, your capabilities, your future vision. Letting other people define your brand is irresponsible. Great brands define their brands and then ensure that their organizations live up to them. They have the clarity of purpose and ownership to build a brand that they define as opposed to kind of operating by the whims of the marketplace. You see, you can't operate with your brand off to the side, separate from how you run your business. That's really short-sighted. You know, you can't just say, oh, we have this brand idea, we're gonna put it out to the marketplace, see what people think. If they don't like it, we'll pivot. You know, I hear this with startups all the time, but even very large established organizations often operate as if their brand is so incidental to their business that they can kind of change it whenever they like. Your brand is not an image that you can change the way people change a pair of clothes. A corporate makeover will only work if it's taken after substantive changes have happened in the business itself. And that's because a brand is what you do and how you do it. Okay, in business school, they'll tell you that a brand is defined as the unique bundle of values and attributes that distinguish the value you deliver to customers and the way that you do business, but it really boils down to your brand is what you do and how you do it. And therefore, a strong brand should drive, align, and guide everything you do as an organization. Now, when you think of and use your brand in this way, it has so much power because it makes it easy for everyone who works on your brand because they know how to support it, how to grow it, how to make decisions about what to do and what not to do, because everyone shares one common understanding of your brand, what the role is that you're going to play in the world and how you're meant to play it. It makes it ruthlessly clear how you should be spending your resources so that you don't waste your time on things that just aren't right for you and your brand because they're not moving you towards your future. You know, whether it's because they're not driving you closer to your vision, or because they're producing short-term gains at the expense of the long-term, or they're just not producing any real value. Now, I've had the privilege of working on some of the world's greatest brands, and I've studied some of the worst. And by worst, I don't mean that they were bad companies necessarily. They just weren't living anywhere near their potential. And so these organizations wasted their time, money, and energy on things that just didn't work because there was no North Star about what really mattered. So let me tell you a story. Back in 1921, two brothers formed Radio Shack to serve the emerging ham radio market. And for the next several decades, Radio Shack became the place that you'd go to experience the future. You know, gadgets galore, and electronics and radios. At one time, they hired the scientist and science fiction writer Isaac Asimov to be its spokesperson. And they had 7,000 stores. So given this terrific history, Radio Shack should be the king of the technology and electronics world. They should have been the Pied Piper that drew people into their brick and mortar stores and into the digital future. But earlier this year, Radio Shack filed for bankruptcy. And the hedge fund, Standard General, is able to purchase it for a mere $146 million. Gosh, what happened, right? Well, let me explain how a brand that was synonymous with electronics and phones and computers managed to fail in a world where demand for electronics, phones, and computers exploded. First of all, Radio Shack tried to be all things to all people. It didn't focus and streamline its assortment. Then it tried to imitate the emerging big box retailers like Best Buy that were coming into the marketplace, but they couldn't compete with them because they had different capabilities and assets. They also tried to compete with Amazon, same thing, same problem, and they even screwed up the cell phone market because they did too many mobile phone deals, which meant that they ignored the rest of their business. Customer service suffered, and all of their loyal customers ended up being alienated. So they decided to appeal to new millennial customers. They spent nearly $200 million trying to put a hip and cool spin on themselves, rebranding to The Shack. And then they also, more recently in 2014 in the Super Bowl, ran a spot featuring these 1980s pop culture icons. But neither of those efforts worked. The problem was the actual store itself. The experience wasn't appealing to those millennial customers. You know, Radio Shack thought that rebranding and an advertising campaign would save the day, but it takes more than that to turn around a business. All aspects of your business need to be aligned with one common understanding of what you stand for and a vision for your future of your brand. Remember what you do and how you do it. I gotta think that if Radio Shack knew and used the power of its brand to guide, align, and drive everything it did, it would have turned out a little differently. So, well, you start by identifying the gaps between how you use your brand and how great brands use theirs. And I have an assessment that I use with my clients to help them identify those gaps. The assessment is far too long for us to go through all of it today, and you want to be very thorough and thoughtful about it. So we're only going to talk about one of the questions on the assessment today, but because I know this assessment can be so helpful to you, I want to make it available to you so that you can actually take it back to your companies and start working on how you can get more power from your brand. So, if you want to kind of raise your virtual hand and go to this URL, there you will be able to tell me that you want me to email the assessment to you, okay? And later on in my presentation, I'll tell you about some other tools that you can also get from me. So if you don't get this URL now, don't worry about it. I'll show it later as well, okay? But one of the questions on the assessment has to do with your brand stakeholders. When I say brand stakeholders, I mean your employees, executives, partners, agencies, anyone who works on your brand is a brand stakeholder. So I want you to think about your key brand stakeholders. And on a scale from 1 to 10, do your key brand stakeholders tend to be on the one side of the scale, where they tend to disagree about what's on brand and what's not? Or are they more on the 10 side of the scale, where they actually consistently share one common understanding of the brand and how to interpret and reinforce it? So think about it. Think about your key brand stakeholders and give your organization, give them a rating from 1 to 10. Where are you on that scale? Just take a moment and think about that now. How many of you would say that your brand is a 10? Anybody out there? No? Okay. How many of you would say that your brand is a 1? Okay. If you gave yourself an 8 or above, you're in great shape. But if you gave yourself a 7 or below, That may have been enough to get by in the past, but in today's cluttered marketplace, you're saying that you don't have a brand that's strong enough, that has the clarity of focus, the precision of strategy, the high standards of excellence that you need. And we all need to have strong brands. Why? Well, and actually maybe before I say why, let me say that you don't have to be a big brand or big company to need a strong brand. Even very small organizations need to have a great brand. You don't have to be a consumer-facing retail business to need a great brand. Even B2B services companies should be building a strong brand. And that's because, first of all, a great brand means that you can charge more than your competitors. Research shows that people are willing to pay more for products and services from great brands. You also inspire true customer loyalty. You actually are able to develop customer relationships that are emotional, meaningful, and sustainable. You don't have customers who are loyal-ish. You have customers who actively choose to buy from you time and again. When you have a strong brand, you also have lower costs because all your customers are brand ambassadors who do your marketing for you. You also have lower employee costs because you can actually recruit, train, and develop your people easier, and you have a lower turnover. And you're also in a stronger negotiating position with your business partners like vendors and distributors because those companies want to, they know that they can trust you and they want their brands to be associated with yours. According to financial analysts, a great brand also has financial value to investors. So if you want to be acquired or you want to acquire someone, you're in a better position because you have a higher valuation. And when you have a great brand, you have goodwill, or what I call air coverage, because if something goes wrong, and really it's only a matter of time that when something is going to go wrong, you have the goodwill of people who are going to stand up for you, who are going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and who are going to know that you're going to make it right in the end.